right. Here we are. Let's Talk Call-In Radio, talking about issues that affect us all. I believe that's our new slogan.
I'm closing in on elderly.
Oh, pardon, monsieur and mademoiselle. So we're going to be missing Paul Raffel for the next 5 weeks, and this is week 1. So it's just myself, Shelley Rugg, and Stephen Hurwitz.
Hello.
Hello. And so we're going to be doing our best to come up with some topics and get them ready for you. And we really love it when you call in, of course. So jot these numbers down, 415-663-8492 or 8317. And today we're talking about
elder care. What to do with those parents who are getting aged, etc. We're baby boomers, and we're reaching the point that we're either becoming elders ourselves. I wouldn't call myself elder, although I'm at the very beginning of baby boom, 1946. But you know, most of us have seen our parents pass away, die, and we took care of them somewhat, more or less. And now we're still going through that. And we're interested in talking about this subject and having you call in and share your experiences, your fears, your anticipations. It's really something. One thing is to have a healthy parent who is in that time when they really need help from the younger members of their family, and it's even more problematic when they're ill, which is probably often the case. Although I've known many people in their 90s who were fit and had all their marbles and were loath to give up their driver's license.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I ended up having to take care of both of my parents separately. They were divorced, and it was, for me, a very different experience helping with my mother versus helping with my father. Partly because of my relationship with my mother. Mom was really challenging for me, and she was bipolar, and it was hard to be around her with, you knew that at some point during that meeting with her that she was going to give it to you good about something, whether you deserved it or not.
Every morning?
Yeah. Yeah, every day. When I was a kid, I knew she was going to yell at me every day. So I started going to bed early just to avoid being yelled at. So when I became a grown-up, I knew that I didn't have to be around her. And so I kept my distance. And then one day, well, it didn't all happen one day. Let's be honest. I noticed there were signs that something was going on with my mom, and I just kept denying it. I wasn't ready to deal with it. I didn't want to have to deal with it, and I just kept thinking, oh, it's not that bad. But I was questioning, like one time I was going to do a trade show, and I needed some basic drapes made. And so, you cut the fabric to a length, you fold a hem at the top and at the bottom, done, and then on to the next. And when I was a kid, my mom had sewn clothes for me, and I knew she knew how to sew, and this was a really basic project. So, and she always wanted to help me with things. So I said, hey, why don't you sew these drapes for me? But what I discovered was that she could not figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And that was shocking to me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I just shrugged my shoulders.
I have a question. And you're not alone, obviously, and I know somebody that I am close to who made the same kind of choice. But I wonder if you had an abusive parent who all your life treated you unkindly, in a sense, making that decision to actually commit yourself to their last care how do you make that choice? How do you take on that responsibility when there's all that resentment and there's a lot of water under the dam here, or excuse me, over the dam.
Under the bridge.
How do you make that decision? It seems like it would be tough.
Yeah. Well, it was, and that's where I said I kept shoving it aside. I kept being in denial. And then one day I got a phone call from one of her neighbors. She lived in an apartment complex, and the woman said, "Your mom's at my apartment. She's locked herself out of her apartment, and we don't have any more extra keys." So I went to the woman's apartment, and there was my mom sitting in her living room, just happy as a clam, looking at her glass of tea and the ice cubes. And honestly, she was tripping. She was seeing things in her glass. And I learned from the neighbor that apparently my mom locked herself out frequently, and several neighbors had keys, and she had used them all up and not returned them.
Sure.
And so I had to call a locksmith who came and opened the door, and there were her keys right there on the dining room table. And I think that was really when I recognized that I couldn't keep denying that she needed more help.
Yeah, I think medicines are a big one.
Well, yeah.
I think Gail was talking about her mother, who some tough decisions had to be made with her. That the initial, I can't use the same words because I'm not a medical person, but you have an initial dose that's higher than the rest to get you in there, and she kept filling that prescription and taking that higher dose. Oh. And then there were situations I remember where she would take the medicine in the bottle, and then, hey, I'm done. I took the medicine.
Right.
So the med thing is a biggie.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, so one of the issues for my mother was that she had medications that she was supposed to take. That was the exact problem. She was having, I'm going to call it medically induced dementia. It was because of the medication she was taking that made it so she couldn't think correctly. She couldn't remember things. She couldn't keep track of the date, the time, the plans that were being made. She used to drive her friends crazy. If they made a plan with her, she just was calling them repeatedly. Mm-hmm. And so I told some of her friends, don't tell her until you're about to come.
So that's maybe a typical situation that a child is taking care of their parents and not just helping them go to the store and helping them buying. They're taking care of an infirm and perhaps a mentally infirm parent. I know my father had Alzheimer's, and for the early years, he was very good at hiding it. He would do these little things that didn't let. He hired somebody to write his checks.
Wow!
And so he would just sign them.
Well, that's smart.
Yeah, but it's like it misled us. It misled me until he started making some really serious mistakes financially, and then we said, okay.
Yeah. So just real quick, back to the meds from my mom. My routine with her became I would stop at her apartment in the morning on my way to work, and I would write her a note for that day, where I was going to be and what was supposed to happen that day. And I would leave her morning pills out. And then I would come by on my way home from work and give her evening pills. Mm-hmm. And this was just kind of a daunting process for me. And a friend said, how about you hide the evening pills somewhere, and then you can go home and just give her a call and tell her where to find them. And so I started doing that, and that made my life a lot better. So
I think we have a caller.
We do. Caller, you are on the air, and please watch your language and tell us your name.
Good morning, you two.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Okay.
Hi, MK.
I know that you've done a lot of parenting, caring, Shelley.
Yes.
And I took care of my father for the last year and a half of his life on the coast of Maine in his wonderful house way out in the wilderness, which was lovely in some ways and hard in other ways.
Right.
And I have a couple of things that I wanted to just drop into the mix. When the last parent dies, it's been my experience with not just my family, but many others that I've known. The lifeline is gone. No matter how infirm or ill or whatever it is the last parent was, there's something that is it's unraveling about it, and old gripes and problems and so on and so forth can come to the surface. And now that there's no higher authority, as it were, they can just go berserk over pissy little nothings.
What form did that take?
What?
How did that affect you? What was the how
did that affect me?
Yeah, what was the form that it took?
Oh, it was very, very difficult. My husband, who's the bipolar one, and I drove from Seattle to Maine in a Toyota Celica hatchback with a Newfoundland and our meager belongings. It took us 2 days because his dad had fallen on the stairs, on the outdoor stairs, and landed on his back and hurt his back. He was a great tall, 6'5", great big tall guy, but he was really skinny. And they had he was in the hospital briefly and then came home with these round-the-clock nurses that were there, and sometimes they didn't show up. So when we finally arrived in the middle of the night, nobody had showed up for their shift, and my brother, who lived about 100 yards away, was there spending the night and being very unhappy about the fact that he was missing his sleep.
Isn't that interesting?
Just driven 3,000 miles and out of a car. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that was sort of the beginning of it, and Dad and I always got along really well. As in, I didn't get along with my mother, so I understand your difficulties too. But she was long gone. This was in 1998 that this all happened, and so anyway, we got into the routine and got rid of the nurses. I mean, the fact that they sent a different person for each shift was really unprofessional and counterproductive, because, for one thing, Dad wasn't out of his mind. He was very with it, and with these strange people coming in, and he didn't have a lot of really valuable stuff, but, it was kind of like a sitting duck there. So we took care of that, and we hired a girl to come in during the day to help him with lunch and showering and so on and so forth like that, and and Tony and I took care of the meds and so on and so forth. Okay, well, this went on, and we went through a couple of people because Dad was hard to please, and he only wanted me there, and I could see that he was going to, I was going to get eaten alive. So we tried to make a situation that was tenable for everybody, and it worked out pretty well.
Excuse me.
But what?
I thought, so you moved in with your father?
Yeah, in his house on the coast of Maine that he built with my mom for their retirement years, but then she died, and it had been like 9 years before that, or 8 years before that she had died, and he'd been living there all by himself.
That's part of that role reversal where the children become the parent and the parent becomes the child in terms of needs. And there you are moving back into the home. But
it wasn't a home that I'd ever lived in before. So that wasn't there. And he was not the person he was before, because he was a doctor and he was mighty and he was powerful, and then he was this old man who needed help.
Yeah.
And that was enormously helpful for me, because he was grateful.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it was good, and we got along great. And I knew the recipes that my mother had cooked for him, and it was fun. And nobody had taken him out. Nobody had any of his friends over. Nobody had paid any attention to him. It was weird. But now that I know my siblings better, as adults, I understand that they have their limitations, and I didn't have quite as many limitations as they did. But anyway, and I loved the place. It was an absolutely gorgeous, geographical place. And what?
Oh, I was just thinking about the place. That you moved into your father's home in Maine for a time. For me, when I was taking care of my dad, I had tried living with him and, sort of gently being there with keeping an eye on him. And the problem for me was, and actually I had lived in that house when I was in high school. High school and college, I lived there. So now I'm moving back home. I'm in Dad's house. And even though Dad needs my help, and he's grateful for it to, as much as he can be, it's his house and he's my dad. And I'm a grown woman and I couldn't feel like one.
Right. You didn't have a husband with you?
No.
I did.
Yeah.
That helped, even though he was a wacko. Great. He was a great wacko. But
were you the wacko or was he the wacko?
My husband was a wacko.
Oh, okay.
Treated bipolar person who, anyway, it was that's part of it, part of the story.
Well, for me, I was able to deal with my dad better having him move into my home.
Of course, your territory.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
very territorial.
But it's also hard for someone with dementia because it's very confusing. Why can't I go home?
Both of you obviously had the time and energy to do this, but there are a lot of really busy people who are committed.
The time?
Hey,
no,
we gave up.
No time?
It's not about that. It's about making a choice.
I see.
No.
Well,
we didn't make any money doing it. We had bills and we had all the rest of it, so we had to work that out.
Well, so that's about the sacrifice, though, that we can talk about. It's what I'm going to say. People have these busy lives, and they have to make a choice as to really add a enormous commitment to an already busy life that has financial repercussions. So it's not just, I'm going to drop in on Dad.
When you're in it, things are moving along, especially in the beginning, at such a rate that you get kind of stuck in the revolving door for a while, and then when you pop out the other side, you go phew, and then try to get your bearings and do a better job. My sister lives in New Hampshire, which is not that far away from Maine because those states are teensy-weensy little mountains compared to ours. And so, and she had a job and a husband and a house, and she didn't, feel like she should have to.
She couldn't make that commitment, make that change.
Well, no, really. And what ultimately, and I'm not feeling sorry for myself because I'm enormously grateful for who I am. That they kept whenever there was a decision to be made, a doctor's appointment or a change of employees or whatever else, I would call my sister and tell her the situation, and I'd tell my brother the situation, and they'd say, use your best judgment. And I did that for a while, and my judgment was pretty good, but I realized that everything that I was going to do was somehow going to be wrong. So I did it anyway, and I realized it's a great life lesson, I'll tell you. When everything you do is going to be wrong, you can do anything you want.
I'm not going to remember that, honestly.
Well, in my case, it worked really well. Anyway, push comes to shove. Every time the coast of Maine in the winter is a wild place. And fortunately, he lived on the road with a lobster fisherman, had their dock, and so it was plowed. So that was taken care of, at least. And we got somebody in to plow the driveway. But every time there was a snowstorm, Dad would get pneumonia and have to go to the emergency.
Oh, no.
Be admitted to the hospital. And that happened like 4 or 5 times. And my husband had, during that fall, had a manic episode that ended up with him spending a whole bunch of the family's money and ending up in jail and getting DUI and blah, 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 blah. And so that was not helpful. And so he finally got straightened out and was actually helpful for me. But he'd lost his driver's license, so I had to do all the driving. And
Oh, speaking of driving, that was a real issue with my father because towards the end, before I moved him up to live with me, his life basically was get up in the morning, take your meds, and then get in the car, go for a drive, and, say to yourself, oh, I know where I am. Oh, this is familiar. Stop at Carl's Jr., sit in the outer edge so you can see the entire place, and and whip out your notebook and take notes on what you see and what's happening. And people know you there because you come there every day, probably more than once a day. And they say, hey, and they welcome you by name. So it feels safe. It feels familiar. And then he'd go up the hill to the Kaiser facility and get his blood pressure checked. And I discovered later, I looked at the website, that he had been going frequently. And I was amazed that nobody called and said, did you know that your father is getting his blood pressure checked every day?
Oh my God.
But driving was his thing. And then he'd go home, he'd take a nap, then he'd get in the car and drive around again.
Sure, it made his life.
It felt like he was doing something. Oh, and shopping. He'd go shopping and he'd go up and down the aisles in Target in one of those little electric carts, and he'd buy whatever he could reach off the the end caps.
I think the driver's license is a big deal.
But yeah, we had to go through the driver's license review, like I think 4 times before it. Finally, a nurse at Kaiser and I wrote letters to the DMV, and they finally took his license away. But he would he'd do okay in the written test. He would pass the interview, and he might not pass the driving test, but they'd let him do it again, and then he'd pass, and then he was still on the road. And this happened, 3 times in a row.
My dad was great. He just wanted to prove to himself that he could get his driver's license, and after that, he didn't want to drive anymore.
Oh, you're lucky.
How I lucked out. I was so lucky.
Yeah, because that was...
The way he was driving was enough to give you a nervous breakdown every single day.
Yeah, it was
You'd be
so
right
hard.
on the shoulder, and you just like, I'm not a good passenger anyway.
My dad got a speeding ticket and a ticket for turning left in the left turn lane.
Yep.
And I actually had to go to court with him, and it became apparent to the judge pretty quickly that he wasn't in his right mind, because he just thought this court stuff was just so fun. Look at us, we're in court, And so the judge told me that I needed to make sure that he was safe on the road, or. So, and same with the meds, I remember taking my dad to the doctor. He went to this dementia care clinic, and after the first visit, I was taken aside and told I needed to now be responsible for his medications. And that was a lot of weight on my shoulders.
Tough. Yeah. That's a hard one.
It's 415-663-8492. If somebody's got a story they want to share with us, we're here. We've got a phone line open.
And we're talking about?
And we're talking about taking care of elderly parents. It seems to be something that is coming of age part. It's pretty much unavoidable, unless, say, you've got a sister who wants to take it on. That's another thing. It seems like the women,
predominantly
the sisters
are the ones.
are more likely expected to do this instead of the brothers.
Well, I have 2 brothers, and I don't know that they expected me to do it, but they were very grateful that I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my siblings were grateful all over the place.
Yeah.
But that's because they didn't have to do it.
Right.
One thing that I wanted to bring up is that if you are a caretaker for an older person, take downtime. I think the whole year and a half or 2 years that we were there, we had maybe 2 weekends where we actually went away. And that was our fault, because we didn't say, okay, this is...
Yeah, you got to take care of yourself. Yeah.
You have to take care of yourself. And it's hard being a caretaker to anybody, but especially if you happen to love the person.
So didn't you have somebody coming in other hours? I mean, were you like 24-hour caretakers?
Yeah, we lived in the house with him. In the summer, we lived up in the big house, which is close up in the wintertime, because it's a summer house. And then there was the distance, but a little distance.
Is that because it was so isolated, or there weren't assets to use, or you couldn't qualify for, what is it, Medicare?
Oh, he qualified for all kinds of stuff, but he wanted us. He wanted us to just be there. And ultimately, finally, there was one snowstorm, and he was having pneumonia, and the local guy came in with his ambulance thing, and he said, well, we'll see you the next time. And I said, there's not going to be a next time. And after that, he went into a nursing home, and he died 3 weeks later.
That's a whole nother subject.
And I knew it, and he wanted to be gone. He didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
He was in his right mind until the end of his maybe a week when he was, on a cruise ship or back in the Navy in World War II or whatever it was. And I learned a lot about World War II during those years. I will tell you that, because he never would talk about it. He was on a destroyer that was sunk, and and all of this stuff. And he never wanted to talk about it when he was younger. And then when he got to be in his 80s, he wanted to talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
And it was as fresh as if it had happened the day before. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's a fascinating character. But then at the end, he died at the nursing home, and we stayed on for another, because that was in November, we stayed on until the next June, and I got a job at the local elementary school, working, with a behavior kid, and then we left.
Yeah.
But and that was that. And my brother didn't talk to me for 10 years. My sister didn't talk to me for 12 years, and the only reason she did talk to me was that I reached out to her.
Was that what? Were they angry with you, or
they were? Well, my brother wrote this horrible letter to a whole bunch of people saying what a bunch of leeches Tony and I were, and how we'd taken advantage of the whole thing. We hadn't. He was just, and so he sent it out to people, and I was just broadsided by it. And one friend said that was the most guilt-ridden letter she'd ever read in her life. And this is an intelligent person, and it's very complicated. There's so many layers of resentment, and I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard. So anyway, my brother and I are great friends again now. That I've been to Hawaii, and in 10 years I wrote him and said, don't you think that we've been built for long enough? I mean, come on. And he said, yeah, until we went on a road trip to Santa Fe. That was fun. And now we're fine.
Very good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and do a station break right now.
Okay.
You're listening.
You guys.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay.
Again, bye.
Thanks for calling. Bye-bye. You are listening to Let's Talk Call-In Radio on KWMR, Point Reyes Station, 90.5 Point Reyes, 89.9 in Bolinas, and 92.3 in the San Geronimo Valley.
And this is KWMR. We are sponsored by Drake's Bay Oyster Company, who continues to keep on shucking, providing sustainably farmed oysters for the waters of Pacific Coast to restaurants, markets, and oyster bars in Northern California. It's employee-owned and grown. More information at 415-669-1149. And Horizon Cable. Highlighted internet services for KWMR are underwritten by Horizon Cable, cablecasting KWMR on television, Channel 47 in Point Reyes Station, Olema, Inverness Park, Inverness, Dillon Beach, online at horizoncable.com.
Very good. And so we're talking about caring for elder parents. And the numbers to call are 415-663-8492 or 8317. And we actually have someone on our 8492 line. Caller, you are on the air. Please tell us your name.
Wrong line.
Hello? Okay, call back. And so we'll see if we have a caller or not.
I think an issue that comes up, at least this issue came up with my mother's mother, my wife's mother, which is this business of when you have to decide whether she's going to a nursing home or assisted living, and there's that whole issue of leaving your home, the home they've lived in. And I know for me that'd be quite an occasion to have to give up the place that has all your memories, has all the things that you love, and have to go someplace else knowing you're never going home.
Right. Well, when I brought my dad up to Inverness, my intention was to move him into Stockstill House. I had done all the paperwork and, all the prep to get him admitted. They accepted him. And so I started my idea was we were going to transition into this new home. And previously to this point, a friend of his had come up to check Stockstill House out. And we brought Dad there to visit. And he just thought it was the best place he'd ever been. He'd been there before. He recognized the view out of the bedroom window. He was just happy as a clam to be there. And his friend and I looked at each other and said, well, I guess he is ready. He doesn't even recognize what kind of a place this is. And so that's what helped me to move forward, was because I knew he didn't really know. So then when I started to bring him for these visits, and we'd just go and we'd sit and have tea and play, have a conversation with people and then come home. And then I think the second time I brought him, he leaned over towards me, nose to nose, looked me in the eye, and he said, "You're trying to put me away." And that was a real trigger for me. I didn't want him to feel rejected or thrown away or put away. And I couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. And so we just kept him at the house. And then at some point, it became kind of tense in the home, particularly between my partner and my dad. My dad could be really rude and nasty to my partner, and it made it really hard to live. And so I thought, well, maybe there's somewhere else that would work better for him, where the people who live there are more lively and can engage with conversation, beyond the staff. I went and looked at the home in Bolinas, and I felt like maybe he'd be okay there, although honestly, I found the place a little bit cluttered, and I know he doesn't like clutter, so I didn't think he would like it. But I thought, I'm determined. I'm going to do this. It's for the good of our household. And I went home and I went on the website and was reading, and I just started to cry, and I couldn't do it. So for me, I personally couldn't do that to my dad because I knew him, and I knew how it would affect him. And even his doctor said if he's in a home, he won't live as long as he will with you.
I think one of the ingredients that makes, say, assisted living, or she was in a nursing home and it wasn't right for her. She needed more interaction, etc. But I think making a friend is crucial. Finding somebody new there that you hang out with, that you exchange things with. I know for Beverly, once she started making some friends, then it seemed like a much, nursing homes, there just isn't enough activity, mm-hmm. and there's just not enough interaction and going around. But and they sort of warehouse you in many ways. Mm-hmm. But I think that friendship makes all the difference in terms of because they're very isolated at home. Yeah.
Well, for my dad, because he loved to drive and he loved to go out to eat. And so we actually hired some people that would do just that. They'd take him for a drive for the day and take him out to eat. And he was so happy in the moment. He'd get depressed around the house because he couldn't remember that he had been out and had a fun adventure that day. So his thoughts were, is this what my life's become? Sitting here,
I feel the same way.
Doing nothing, accomplishing nothing. But yeah, when I was taking care of my dad, it was definitely hard at times. There's no doubt about that. It strained my relationship. It made it hard for me to move forward with things I wanted for my own personal self, for my own life. But I actually did a pretty good job at taking care of myself and managing for my own self what I needed to do. And I had more than one time somebody, have a heart talk with me and let me know that it is absolutely okay for me to put my dad in a home. If that's what, I need.
The issue is yourself, not your father.
Right. And, when I was going to bring him to Stockstill House, they said, this decision is yours. And so, So for me, it felt good to, I liked being a so-called good daughter to my dad, and he loved me for it. And he told me all the time how much he loved me and how much he appreciated me. And, that's the pay right there. But everyone's different, and everyone has different things to deal with. And some people, my dad didn't need any real hands-on physical help until the last 2 weeks of his life.
Well, that's really lucky, because there's that other situation where, you're changing diapers,
right?
Whatever. It can make it a lot more difficult.
Yeah, and like I said, it was just the last 2 weeks of his life. He developed a blood clot in his leg, so he couldn't walk to the restroom, and so we had a lot of help. And a lot of laughs and a lot of anguish, all kinds of fun stories during that time, but some hard ones too. And we have a caller. Caller, you are on the air. What's your name?
Hi, it's me again.
Hi.
I just wanted to tell you that my children's father died of COPD and lung cancer. And he really wasn't a very attentive father. He didn't see a whole lot of the children when they were growing up. So he was just off doing other things.
Uh-huh.
And at the end of his life, my two younger children, especially since they live here, took him almost daily to appointments and were so incredibly kind to him that I was really flabbergasted. I was so pleased. I was so happy because it was above and beyond. It was a devoted thing to do. I had nothing to do with it except maybe to raise them to be a little bit compassionate, or a lot compassionate. But anyway, I was just really. It can happen if you have a parent that you don't get along with. I'm glad I didn't have to take care of my mother. God feel for you, because wow, that would have been a toughie.
Well, in my case, it was especially hard because she was on a cocktail of psych meds, and I would go with her to her psychiatrist, and I'm going to make this public service announcement for anybody who's on psych meds. Have an advocate, have someone you trust go with you to your appointments to help you. Tell the doctor what's actually going on for you, because if you might not be able to self-assess. And so this is what I observed with my mom is the doctor would say, "So, how you doing?" And she'd say, "I'm doing great." Mm-hmm. When actually there were quite a laundry list of problems that she was having. So, yeah.
Yeah, you get into all sorts of confidentiality stuff. I mean, I dealt with a husband that was bipolar, and the way the state protects people with mental illness is very counterproductive a lot of the time.
Yeah.
How do you tell somebody that's having such a great time that they need to take a pill so they won't have a great time?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
No, that's not going to happen. Anyway,
yeah, I learned a lot, actually. Unfortunately, I learned a lot of lessons taking care of my mom that then later with my dad, I was able to, make use of those lessons.
Well, yeah, that's how we learn stuff most of the time. The big trial is the big learning experience. So, and now my darling, wonderful children are taking care of me.
Aww.
That's good.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it's very, very interesting, but they're good guys, and hope you guys have come on, people call.
All right.
Yeah,
Let's
did you hear
give
that?
out that number again.
Did you hear that, listeners? We want you to call and tell us all about
it's called
your
Let's
experience.
Talk.
I got you guys on speed dial. They don't even have to remember the number.
All right.
Clever.
It's 415-663-8492. give us a call. Let us know. Have you been through this, or do you see that you're going to be? What do you anticipate? What are you afraid of? There's lots to be concerned about in terms of afraid of what it's going to take out of you.
Everybody has different equipment. We're all equipped differently, and what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for the other one. But there are always things we can learn from each other. And I'd love to hear from people who have experiences that were great or experiences that were challenging. It's not a, hey, I got to move in situation either. Assisted living can be really a good experience if you find the right place. There are people. We got a call. Let's do that. Is it line 1?
Oops, I thought so.
Okay. Caller, you are on the air. What's your name?
Hi, this is Anonymous.
Anonymous.
Hello.
So thank you for calling.
Yeah, thanks for this good discussion. I was just calling because, a couple years ago, my mom got Alzheimer's, and my dad is the primary caretaker, but it's been a really interesting process, and I just had a couple observations. One was it brought us a lot closer in a very different way than I expected, and I would say both my dad and I have grown a lot from it and gotten different skills that we never knew we needed. So that's been interesting. It's also been, really challenging, and at times challenged my relationship with my dad. But we've made the choice to get through anything together, kind of.
Nice.
So that's been good. But then the other thing was I saw my mom taking care of her dad, who also had Alzheimer's, and I think it kind of broke her down, and she never quite recovered, and so I'm also kind of determined to not let that happen to me.
Right, I think,
and not let it derail me in this time in my life. So it's kind of a weird balance, but a lot of guilt around it, and I should be doing more, blah blah blah. But just trying to strike that balance of not getting down the rabbit hole.
It's like they say, give yourself the oxygen first, right?
Yes, exactly. So it's that balance, and then also just. Everyone knows this, but getting that paperwork done before parents are unable to do it themselves, and especially so you're able to respect their wishes,
right?
Because it's hard to have, even if people are still capable of signing, sometimes they don't want to,
right?
So even if it's something that does support what they. It would be good for them. They still don't want to sign it. So, so that's my take. Thank you guys for the discussion. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there.
Just dying to call.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you for calling and appreciate your contribution.
8492.
Yeah, thanks.
There you go.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, my dad was really good at taking care of his business, and he had a trust that he had written up and everything. But when his memory really started to go, we could not find it. And I went back to the lawyer that had written it up, and he couldn't seem to find a copy of it. What I'm really grateful for is I had a friend of my dad's was helped people with their end of life dealings. Whether it's, helping be an advocate for them in the hospital or, taking care of their business, that's what she did. So I was able to really lean on her. And so we had to go get a new trust written up. And I took Dad to the meetings, and we finally had a draft of the trust. And Dad insisted he must read every single word of that document and before he would sign it. So we started to read through it, and he'd started asking me questions that I didn't have good answers to. And it became a very frustrating experience. And I just thought, oh my gosh, he's never going to sign this thing. I don't know how this is going to happen. So I reached out to the friend, and she came over, and for 2 days in a row, she sat with him and went through every page of that document, explained to him what each thing meant, and then had him initial the bottom of the page. And she reminded him, once you've initialed it, we're not going back. And she would remind him of that. You've initialed it, you've okayed it, we're not going back. And she just really got through that document with him and got him to sign it. And it's like so good that that she did, because I don't know. And then, he really had a problem with the term becomes incapacitated. And he didn't want to become incapacitated. And so because I was co-trustee, he never had to know about being deemed incapacitated. And so I was really grateful for that as well.
Well, that brings up a really good point, and that is taking care of business while somebody still has their marbles. And so you don't have all those sticky issues. I know in the state of Florida, you can't even get into an assisted living program paid for by Medicare or whatever unless you're really impoverished. If you have assets, they've got to be gone before you can get in there. So
yeah, we've got a caller. You're on the air. What's your name?
Hi, it's Amanda.
Hi, Amanda.
How you doing?
Great.
Interesting topic. I kind of got in late because I was at a meeting, but I was just thinking that about my dad, who wasn't very old at all, but was dying, and he decided pretty soon before he was going to pass away that he wanted to change his entire will.
Oh, my. Yeah.
And he wanted to make it uneven.
Yeah.
And so I'm the oldest, and so he said he wanted to meet with me, and he told me what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. And I was like, it's your stuff. Do whatever you want. But daylight's burning here, pal. Like, we got to get this thing done.
Yeah.
And he was able to get it done with the help of his attorney. And what was really nice was that it wasn't sort of like a split up everything equally. And he made some interesting decisions, and that everybody was okay with it, and there was no disagreements.
Wow.
No fighting.
That's very fortunate.
I am so fortunate about that, and I think that if anybody else can make that happen in their lives, they will increase their quality of existence immensely. I'm still just in awe of the fact that there weren't any issues.
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of a gift also to your children to set it up so that it's fair and people are in
But
agreement.
it wasn't. He did it like totally this bizarre way that he wanted to, and we all recognized that it was his choice to do that, and we could just deal with it.
Well, good for you guys.
Yeah, it was really. I was kind of astounded. I was like, this could go very, very poorly.
Mm-hmm.
But it might have been also just sort of the nature of the relationship with him, which was not ever particularly close in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Dynamics are always different in everybody's family, but somehow we were able to handle it and move on as a family just fine.
Nice.
Yeah, so I was kind of glad about that.
Yeah, I just had to sell my dad's house not too long ago, and that same friend that helped me get Dad to sign the trust also, recommended that I get a trust attorney. And that, for me, was so helpful. It really took the pressure off me. And now, the attorney was saying, this is what you must do, And it really helped me a lot.
Yeah, these things are tough. And it's like, looking down the road at any situation, it's like you gotta... I think the biggest thing is to just really realize that life is sort of temporal, and that it's the person who's going through the transition. It's about them.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's about the children too. You have to feel that you've done right by your parents. You got to be able to say, okay, I did my job, I took my responsibility, I did it well, I made a commitment. To go on in life and say, gee, I really let that person down. That's carrying a load that, I wouldn't want to carry that. I feel, I don't know. I mean, that's why I feel I don't want to carry the load that I didn't do right by somebody, especially a parent.
Yeah, well, that's a good observation. And I hope your kids are going to take good care of you, Stephen.
Eli, are you listening to this?
All right. Carry on with your bad self.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for calling. Yeah, I know. I think about my daughters sometimes. I remember one of my daughters said, "I'm not doing it," and I'm thinking, "But you're the one I want to do. I want."
I'm not sure that's who I don't think I'd necessarily want my children to be doing it, honestly.
Well, I think it all kind of depends.
Yeah.
You know,
if I was really infirm, I don't think so. I really wouldn't want to set up that relationship. I'd rather have somebody else. I mean, if I was really sick and infirm. That's just how I picture it. It's a very humiliating situation if you're have all your mental faculties, and now you're in a situation where some of the most intimate parts of your life are taken care of by a stranger or by somebody who I would rather have it be somebody that I'm not related to, I guess.
Yeah.
Some people who are trained and are very sympathetic and empathetic. I think it's just not something that everybody can do.
Yeah. I know my mom's mom, at the end of her life, her husband had already died, and she had emphysema, and, you know, she had trouble getting around. She couldn't stand in the kitchen and cook anymore, and, you know. And she was able to afford a live-in helper. So this woman lived at her house, cooked food for her, made sure the housework was done, and she, you know, got her bath and got to her appointments. And the bummer for my grandmother that happened because of the situation was that even though she had a do not resuscitate order, her caregiver couldn't honor it. She couldn't bring herself to honor it. And she actually brought my grandmother back, and my grandmother was very angry. I remember that. But, you know, that's a lot of pressure, you know, on someone. But it's important, you know, if you thinking about your elderhood, it's important to have those kind of papers in order and know where they need to be posted and who needs to know about it. Because, you know, if you're not well, it's nice to be able to let go and die when you're ready.
Yeah, if you made that decision.
Yeah.
Be honored.
Yeah. And, you know, I know my dad, if he had really realized what was going on with him, he wouldn't have, you know, well, to be honest, he did talk often about killing himself, you know, and so that's something we had to deal with also. The depression, the thoughts, you know, you're just sitting at the edge of your bed thinking, what's become of my life? I don't understand why I'm here and what's going on. And, you know, he'd say, I'm thinking about that song, Old Man River, you know.
My mother was a few months shy of 100 years old, and she went to a hospital. She had an ulcer and she needed an operation. And I said, Mom, you know, what do you want him to do here in this situation? She said, everything. She wasn't ready to give up at all. 100 years old. Please, she had her problems too, but fortunately she was very bright. She had
her mental capacity was strong.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
I hope I have that, but
yeah,
she had it all.
Yeah, my dad's mom, she was great. She worked until she was 80 years old, and when she finally retired, she went into showbiz, so to speak. She started out singing at a piano bar, then she joined a group called Sweet Adelines, which is like female barbershop choir, and they'd take cruises and sing. And then she found this in Santa Cruz. She found this organization called Seniorama, and they put on essentially like vaudeville shows with a little comedy, a little song and dance. And she ended up, you know, becoming one of the stars of the show, and she was probably the oldest person in the group.
That's wonderful.
So she was like in her early 90s and, you know, making the cover of the local paper with her fishnets on and all this stuff. But then she started losing her sight more. Her hearing was going more. She started being afraid to be on stage because she was afraid she would fall off. And so slowly but surely, her social connections started to dwindle and fall away. Her senses started to dwindle and fall away. And she started to get anxiety, and then they put her on some anxiety meds. And then she wasn't my same grandma anymore at that point. But she would talk about, I want to lie down in the road and someone just run me over. You know, it was hard to hear Grandma say those things. But all right. Well, I guess we're at the end of our show. Thanks to MK, Amanda, and Anonymous for calling in today. We really appreciate it. And if you have any ideas for topics for this show for the next 4 weeks, Steve and I would love to hear about them. You can post on our Let's Talk on KWMR Facebook page. And I guess we'll be signing off for today.
Hey, thank you.
Coming up next will be Julie Motz. So see you next time.